why did I commit to this class? So to some extent, I'm just going to be real transparent and honest with you guys. I stand before you, I told Scott just recently, almost hypocritical with this topic because I am completely overwhelmed all the time. I have 5 kids. At one point, we had 5 kids, 6 and under. I'll get to that kind of when we came to this class, to this church several years ago, and I mean, we were drowning. I've been busy my whole life. Played sports growing up. I worked 4 jobs in college, went to undergrad, went to medical school, went to residency, had 5 kids, haven't watched TV in 20 years. So to some extent, I am a case report on success, but on the other end, I'm a case report in failure for being productive and not being able to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. I imagine that other people in this room feel the same way about certain aspects of their life. So this topic has meant a lot to me in terms of trying to be a good steward of the things that God has given me, and understanding how to be a better manager of my time. And this has evolved. I'm 38 years old right now, technically middle-aged. I know that I may not look like it, but objectively in this country, I am middle-aged. So just a lot of reflection lately, in terms of what I've done with my time and what I'm going to do with my time. So when Chris asked me to teach this last fall, I said yes. I thought that I would have capacity and time, and since that time, the things that have happened in the last few months, a big project I was working on got off the ground. A business I started had a big hiccup, which I'll talk about. Kids are home for the summer, and I honestly, almost truly have had 0 free time, and I was pretty close to actually canceling this class. But this is a topic that I have been focused on for 15 years, and talking to Scott, I think it's good to have these discussions, and I think it's good just to be able to share with you the things that I've learned over time, and why this is an important topic. So this is going to be a class on works, on good works. I realize that I am in a Reformed Baptist church, and I am as reformed as anybody that you'll meet. However, at the age of 38, I am starting to see the sleeping giant in the United States that is the church. We have a lot of intellectual assent to God, which is beautiful. The Word of God is beautiful. Our preaching is beautiful. Our listening is amazing. But when I look around this community, and I look around in my own lives, and I look around in the lives of so many people that call themselves Christians, and this may not be this classroom, and you all are here in the morning on Sunday school. This may not be you, but I see so much potential, and I see so much or just potential that is not in action. And this is a topic that I feel a lot about. I think Herschel going through the spiritual gifts recently, I think I realized that my gift is exhortation, and that's who I've always been. And so I hope that this class will in some capacity be useful to you, and that it will motivate you to do more about what you believe. So that is, and to do more about what you believe better. And that is what this class is ultimately going to be about. So an overview for today, I'm going to discuss my story. Ultimately, this class is not going to be about my story, but I want you to have some background on why I care about this and my own struggles and why I stand before you, so to some extent hypocritical on this topic. I want to talk about the ongoing tension that I've had to learn to live with, and I'm sure that most of you are trying to learn to live with as well. And I want to talk about this idea that I love called learning to love the gap, and we'll discuss that. Then, more of the time, I kind of want this to be a dialogue. A lot of what we do, we have a lot of lectures in academics. We have a lot of lectures, and I want to hear from you all. So if Joshua is not in here, so unfortunately I don't have the person I knew would talk a lot. But I want to hear from you all because honestly, number one, I think it will help me tailor our discussions for the future weeks. But what I want to hear from you is what you want to produce, and in your lives and what you feel like you're not producing, because I think that will help me tailor our discussions in future weeks. And then I want us to take an assessment of our life. Lots of books that I will mention over this course. One book, which is very superficial from a biblical standpoint, does have some Bible in it, is a book called Halftime. Forewords by Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great. So he was a disciple of Peter Drucker, who, if you all know anything about operational kind of quality improvement type work, Peter Drucker is one of the most famous people. But we'll talk about a halftime assessment, and then we'll talk about future weeks. I plan on getting into some operational tactics that are modern theory with quality improvement and process improvement in the workplace. There is almost nothing in Christian literature on this topic. There's one good book, if you want to look it up. It's called What's Best Next. That is probably the only book that I've found that aligns with our theology that even remotely addresses this topic of time management and productivity. He's a guy that works for Desiring God with John Piper. But honestly, most of what you'll find, and this is not a knock on the Christian community, but most of what you're going to find in my sense is over-spiritualized. Again, I'm standing before you. I love the Word of God. I love discipling my children. But I got to a point, and maybe you've been here. So several years ago when I first came to this church, I was really struggling with whether or not I should even continue to be a physician. Because being a physician at times is futile. The longer you practice medicine, the more you realize most of our interventions don't change outcomes. I was also the medical director of UK's ERs during COVID. It's a whole separate discussion. I'm not going to go there today. But again, a lot of what we were doing was futile, and the evidence suggested that. And that's depressing from a physician's standpoint. There's a reason that physicians are one of the highest suicide rates of any career path. And this is one of the reasons, because the longer you practice, the more you think, what am I doing? So there was a sacred and secular divide in my own life and in my own heart. And I thought, well, the only valuable thing really to do is to be a pastor or a missionary. Thankfully, I had a really wise friend in my life who pointed me to the life of William Wilberforce and said, hey, had this guy not stayed in his job, then the slave trade in England or in Europe would not have been eradicated. And that was a good example for me. So I stayed being a physician, and I've tried to do my best with that work. But in terms of what this class is going to primarily focus on, it's going to primarily focus on the secular life, on your life as a parent, on your life as a teacher, on your life as whatever you do. And I want to hear from you guys on whatever you guys do in your own careers, because what this world needs is productivity from all of us with the gifts and skills and talents and resources that each of us uniquely have in this world. Because we have no lack of good preaching in this country. Martin Luther says that God does not need your good works, but people do. So what I hope that this class really ultimately comes to is an increase in good works from your own life, and an understanding, too, that there's going to remain this tension. So this was, does anybody know what this, there's probably a few people in here that know this. This guy, John Piper, got a hold of me when I was about 20 years old. He's been largely influential in who I am as a person. And this was, I'm just going to play this for you. It's a 7-minute clip. But this mentality early on gripped me, and I'm going to start off with our class with this.
You don't have to know a lot of things.
Can you all hear this?
In order to make a huge difference for the Lord in the world. But you do need to know a few things that are great and be willing to live for them and die for them. People that make a difference in the world are not people who have mastered a lot of things. They are people who have been mastered by a very few things that are very, very great. If you want your life to count, you don't have to have a high IQ and you don't have to have a high EQ. You don't have to be smart. majestic, obvious, unchanging, eternal things and be gripped by them and be willing to lay down your life for them, which is why anybody in this crowd can make a worldwide difference. Because it isn't you. It's what you're gripped with. One of the really sad things about this moment right now is that there are hundreds of you in this crowd who do not want your life to make a difference. All you want is to be liked. Maybe finish school, get a good job, find a husband or a wife, a nice house, a nice car, long weekends, good vacations, grow old healthy, have a fun retirement, die easy, no hell, and that's all you want. You don't give a rip whether your life counts on this earth for eternity. That's a tragedy in the making. That is a tragedy in the making. About 3 weeks ago, we got news at our church that Ruby Eliason and Laura Edwards were killed in Cameroon. Ruby Eliason, over 80, single all her life, a nurse, poured her life out for one thing, to make Jesus Christ known among the sick and the poor in the hardest and most unreached places. Laura Edwards, a medical doctor in the Twin Cities and in retirement, partnering up with Ruby, also pushing 80, and going from village to village in Cameroon. And the brakes give way. Over a cliff they go. They're dead instantly. And I asked my people, is this a tragedy? Two women in their 80s, almost, a whole life devoted to one idea, Jesus Christ magnified among the poor and the sick in the hardest places. And 20 years after most of their American counterparts had begun to throw their lives away on trivialities in Florida and New Mexico, fly into eternity with a death in a moment. Is this a tragedy, I ask? It is not a tragedy. I'll read you what a tragedy is. I've got a little article here from Reader's Digest. You don't read Reader's Digest, I know that. But there is a generation who does. This is a tragedy. Title of the article, Start Now, Retire Early. February 1998. Bob and Penny took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago, and he was 59 and she was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect shells. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And there are people in this country that are spending billions of dollars to get you to buy it. And I get 40 minutes to plead chapter before you stand before the creator of the universe to give an account with what you did. Here it is, Lord, my shell collection. Look, Lord, my shell collection. And I've got a good sweep. And look at my bow. God, look at my bow, God. Well, not for Ruby and not for Laura. Don't waste your life. Don't waste it.
Who's seen that before? Yeah, it's good. He wrote a book that corresponds to that called Don't Waste Your Life. I love Piper. Again, the majority of what Piper's entire ministry is about, which has been the most influential ministry in my life, is what he calls Christian hedonism. And again, he doesn't focus much on the practical aspect of most of our lives. And again, I 100% agree that this mentality of, look, Lord, my shell collection, that's what a lot of us are pursuing in our lives. So has anybody heard of the FIRE movement, F-I-R-E? It's a big movement in medicine. This is going to be disturbing to you all if you haven't heard of this. It's called Financial Independence, Retire Early. Just give you an example. There is an ER doctor in Frankfort right now who's about my age who is about to retire. He minimized his expenses, made as much money as possible, and is about to retire at the age of 38. Financial independence, retire early. It is a big topic in medicine. And why do you think that is? Burnout, 100%, absolutely. I know not one single person, I've been at UK almost a decade, I don't know one single person who is in medicine who is not burnout and ready to quit. At UK, that is different. I'm now at a different organization, different hospital, and I'm enjoying being a physician again for the first time in a long time. But burnout is a big problem, particularly in my career and other people's careers. But this retire early thing is getting worse, and you're not going to have people to take care of you when you're older because of the way things are going, from a medical standpoint. So this is very real in my world. And I have some very close friends who are Christians. Have been deeply studying the Word, raising kids that love the Lord. Like people that are legitimately walking with the Lord that are buying into this. Now, they're not going to be non-productive in other aspects of their life, but I'm just telling you that this idea, this mentality to collect shells is pervasive in our community. Oh, now it's working. Sorry. So I'm going to go through just a few scriptures that are going to kind of be the overarching theme of this class, and a few just ideas and thoughts. Again, the subtext of this class is going to be what to do or how to do more about what you believe. So Ephesians 2:10, we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we might walk in them, that we should walk in them. William Wilberforce, no man has the right to be idle. Where is it that such a world as this, health, leisure, affluence, may not find some ignorance to instruct, some wrong to redress, some want to supply, some misery to alleviate? Matthew 5:16, let your light so shine before others that they might see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Hebrews 12:1-2, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that's set before us, looking to Jesus. This text I'm going to use a lot through the course. There is an operational theory called lean. Who's familiar with lean? Okay. If the rest of you aren't familiar with it, it's very good, and it is functional. This is the Christian aspect of lean, in the sense that the race that is set before us is our Christian walk. But there are things, if you notice from this text, there are things that are weights that are not sin that keep us from running. And one of the things we're going to talk about in this class is going to be how to eliminate waste or weight or variation from things that you have designed into your own life. So how do you design unnecessary things out of your own life so that you can be more productive? For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each man will receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. And in the Greek there, I know I'm not a Greek expert. I just know a few words. It's good for nothing here. So there are plenty of things that we engage in that are good for nothing. A very classic example that I tell my teenage boys that I hang out with all the time, video games, good for nothing. I would encourage an argument to try to tell me that they're good for something. So I feel strongly about that. I realize we had a class on conscience that Chris taught. Maybe I need to listen to that some more. But this also is one of the most impactful scriptures for me on this topic. I will most gladly spend and be spent for your souls. This is the end of 2 Corinthians. He's addressing the church as his spiritual children. There are many things that we should do in this life. Remember, his spending, too, in this context was not getting paid by the church. So there are many things that we should be doing in this life that are not paid, that expend ourselves to our maximum extent. Then John Wesley, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. So, a little bit of background on my theology. I did not grow up a Christian. I started reading the Bible, went to Forks of Elkhorn, got saved. I barely read the Bible at all. Then started reading the Bible a lot more, and it was just me and God in the Bible for a while. And I remember the first time I heard about Reformed theology. I was in Birmingham, Alabama. David Platt was my preacher, if you know who he is. And I remember him preaching about it. I was like, no, this can't possibly be right. Over time, completely aligned with that theologically. But, as I've been a Christian and interacted with so many people from different denominations, I have found a lot of people that love Jesus that are in different sects, different backgrounds theologically, where we don't disagree on foundational topics. And I think John Wesley would be one of those people. We would not align with exactly what he would teach. But did the man live his life for others as a result of his belief and his faith in Christ? Absolutely. And I don't want to condemn the SBC or anything like that. But what I am saying is that over time I have found that good works, when done as an overflow of faith, it's real. And there's a lot of different churches that do that. And it's not just Southern Baptists. That being said, the name of this class is Restful Productivity, and it's going to be productivity on the basis of rest and resting in God's grace. So in future weeks, we are going to talk about resting in God's grace and the theology of rest and how important that is as a foundation of doing good works. But that the consequence of that, the consequence that you cannot help, is good works. So good works should manifest themselves in your lives to the maximum extent. So is this a class on good works? Yes. Am I trying to be heretical by saying that good works are the thing that gain right standing before God? No. Okay, so, but I am saying that if your life is not full of good works to the point where you are spent and being spent, that you can always do more. And that is going to be my conclusion. So, you all heard a little bit about me, and the reason I'm going to tell you my story is because I want you to hear some of my successes, why I'm teaching on this, but also ultimately how that led to some of my failures, and why I still struggle with these topics. So, God gave me grace to be a good kid, even though I was a good kid and based on my own selfishness and self-centeredness before I was a Christian. But I became a physician, was the youngest person in my department to be at UK to be promoted to associate professor, and I worked on projects that seemingly were good. And y'all will look at them and you'll say, and I'm going to show you a few of my projects, you'll say they were good. But my wife at times was like, hey, why don't you have the same passion for our home that you have for work? Right, and there's been this tension, and you all know I love my wife and I love my kids, but there's an ongoing tension. And I bet most of the men in this room feel the same way, or women if you're working too, outside of the home, like that you're going to feel this same tension. That there are things that you feel called to that are good, that we have to balance. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. I'll talk to you about the secular sacred divide that I had. I almost quit medicine about 4 or 5 years ago. Thankfully, Herschel talked me out of it, and as did another friend. But I was this close to quitting medicine to be a pastor because I had an incorrect view of the value of other jobs that thankfully God has helped me with over the last few years. I'm going to talk to you about a few of my projects here in just a second. The purpose of me showing you these slides is not to dive into the topic itself, but to show some operational theories and tactics that I've learned over time based on the problems I've had to deal with, and how I'm going to learn and how I'm going to apply those to some personal things. I've never seen or heard this taught before, and you all might think I'm crazy at the end of all this, but this is kind of this is where my background leads to be standing before you today. So a project that I'm currently leading, I still lead this at UK. Hepatitis C is a disease that kills more people in this country than all of the communicable diseases combined. It's been very silent. You may not have heard anything about it. You don't have to get into the details here, but basically, I built a program that diagnosed thousands of patients in our department that need treatment in our emergency department. So today, this was as of a month or two ago, we diagnosed over 5,000 people with hepatitis C. Anybody ever known somebody who's died from cirrhosis from hepatitis C? It's really bad, but it's very common. And there's a cure. It's a pill that you take. It's literally just a pill you take that needs a cure. And less than 10% of people in this country have been treated. Overall, this was a study of showing that like 10 to 20, 30%, depending on the age group, are being treated. And I'm just flying through this because I want to show you kind of how this is relevant to this class. But we found that we're diagnosing far more people than we're curing. And so one of the projects that I worked on was I redesigned flows. So understanding some operational theory, we studied all the processes from start to finish. We redesigned the processes. We eliminated waste and variation within the process. We designed a new process that nobody's ever done in the country, and we're the first ER in the world actually to be treating hepatitis C from the ED. And we just went live. We diagnosed over 5,000 people, but our treatment rates, and this is actually inaccurate because it's changed, but our treatment rates have gone up 400%. And our time from treatment went from 500 days to 15 days. So you guys would probably all look at this and say, like, this is good work. Like, this is what God has called me to do in my career, and this is good work, saving people's lives. And again, I'm going to get to the negative aspect of these types of things in a minute, and this balance. But I'm going to talk about some of the tactics, how we can apply. Once we decide biblically what we should individually be doing, I'm going to be talking about how we can apply some of these same tactics to our own decision making and how to make better decisions and to eliminate some of the wasteful things in our own lives by design. Another project that I worked on, if you've ever been to an ER, you probably have realized that the wait times are egregious. Frankfort actually, and I don't care who hears this, is one of the worst around right now. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. This is a national problem. At UK, when I joined in 2015, we had about 400,000 hours of boarding. That means that inpatients that are supposed to be upstairs, they don't have room for, sitting in the ER annually 400,000 hours. So there are no beds to operate out of. So it's often not the doctor's fault in the ER. People were dying in our waiting room. And objectively, just based on math, we didn't have the space that we needed. This was an article in the Washington Post when I started that there was a guy that came. His wife was a professor at UK. He was a triathlete and so incredible athlete. Thankfully, it's the only thing that saved his life probably. But he waited in our waiting room 4 hours, had septic shock, had a really bad infection, and his wife. Basically, her consolation to not sue the university was she was going to make this public, and she was going to make us go through some training. So this catapulted my ability to redesign our processes. Again, it doesn't really matter what this project is about, but we were able to design wait out of the system we so effectively eliminated wait that our waiting room wasn't used for almost 5 years, and we redesigned the waiting room into treatment space. So it allowed us to have an additional 150,000 patients over the last 5 years. UK still has never met the full queue of patients, so we had constant backfill, but we've been able to take care of another 150,000 incremental patients, and we've made several $100 million extra profit from this. The reason I'm telling you this is because these same types of interventions can be done in our own lives, in terms of, once you decide what the right thing to do is, let's look at the things that you're doing and really make some real decisions about getting rid of the wasteful things in your life. And honestly, most of this is very simple. This class is not going to be about specific emails or applications or things that you can use, but ideas and principles and tactics that I hope that we're going to apply to each of your individual instances, so that you can be more productive. So what did this lead to in my own life? Anybody a Mark Schultz fan? I heard some yes. Okay. This song tears me up. I'm going to try to not pay attention to the music, but you know this song. So when I was doing all this, I felt a burden. There were literally people dying in my waiting room at UK. I was medical director, and I was a lot more powerless than you might imagine, but I still took it personally. You know, every time there was a bad outcome in the waiting room or something like that, I mean, we're taking care of hundreds of thousands of patients a year. I mean, I took it personally. And I remember one time, Chrissy my wife just saying, you know, you need to be as passionate about our children as you are about boarding at UK, which is true. Like Chrissy, if you know Chrissy, she is the reason I've done all of these things. She is the reason that I stay in line. 100%. So right around the time when we came here, we had 5 kids, 6 and under. We were trying to homeschool. I was trying to run UKZR. I was trying to do all these things, and Chrissy was drowning, and I didn't know it. I thought she is the most capable human being, the most intelligent, capable human being I've ever met. If you all have interacted with her, you would probably agree with that. But she got to the point where she was so depressed, and I had no idea, and it happened really fast. And ultimately, it was on me and my decision-making and the things that I had chosen to do with my time. And on the surface, all these things I just showed you that impacted hundreds of thousands of people's lives, created thousands of jobs, all kinds of other things. On the surface, it looked good. And I'm not saying it was bad. But what I am saying is that my own choices had consequences, that all this gaining had some losing, right? And I've not figured this out. Things have gotten much better. I can explain to you some of that later if you're interested. But I've had to make a lot of decisions in my own life that have changed. But this song came out around the time my kids were born, and I want to play this song, and I want you to listen to the lyrics, because what I don't want you to hear from my class and from our discussions is that gaining is the point. Gaining is not the point. Do we gain in some of these things? And I'm a huge fan of Wayne Grudem. If you know who Wayne Grudem is, Wayne Grudem writes a lot on the economic impacts of Christian belief. I think he's on. Well, I know he used to write the systematic theology book that they used at Southern, but economic output is a byproduct of productivity, not the main product of productivity. So I don't want you to hear from me that the purpose of this is gaining. The purpose of this is for you each in here and for me to understand what God has called us to produce and to do more of that. And sometimes that implies economic productivity. Jobs are, in my opinion, the way to eliminate poverty from the world is through business. So I'm going to play this song for you. I want you to listen to the words, and then we'll dive into more of an interactive discussion. If you can hear it. So that is kind of the end point of a life that is lived for gaining. A few years ago, I was UK's medical director, and I had 25,000 emails in 1 year, 13,000 unread emails this night. Was doing my best, and had 5 kids. Abby was playing soccer. I went to one of her games, and she was, if you know Abby, she's very timid, and she's still timid. That's who God made her to be. And I said, Abby, you got to be more aggressive. And she's like, can you help me with that? And my response was, no, I'm too busy. And Chrissy destroyed me that night and said, your child just wants to spend time with you. And I went to talk to her, told her I was sorry, and she just broke down into tears, and she said, sorry. She said, Daddy, she said, you're always working. We're always thinking about work. Sorry, I haven't told many people the story. And I said, you're right. So the next day I quit my job as a medical director at UK. And that's been where all this has started. So the response to that is not to do nothing. I'm still a doctor. God's given me gifts and talents and skills. So trying to learn since then, this was several years ago at this point, trying to learn how to be a dad better and a husband better, but not giving up on the things God has called me to do in my career and other things is the balance. And that is why I've been so obsessed and focused on this topic, because I look around at you guys. I look around at the kids I'm around, and the kids that are in our community. And there's some unbelievable potential, unbelievable talents and minds and bodies and skills. And the solution is not to be financially independent and retire early and go collect seashells. The solution is not to quit being a doctor. The solution is not to quit things, but to do them better and to balance them better and to do the right things. I'm a full believer that really no one should be doing nothing, that everyone has something to add to the world. So anyway, this hits home with me, obviously, and Piper. So all of this is, some of this is about what I've done, and in just a minute I'm going to ask some questions, and I want you to start thinking about what you've done. But the world we live in is a world of retrospective analysis, of looking back. Who in here has a resume immediately available right now? Okay. So when I was going through that time of wanting to quit everything, I called my friend who's the chairman at University of Alabama, Birmingham, their ER where I trained, and he knew about all these things that I had done, and I just looked at him and I said, Andy, I said, I'm so burnt out right now. I said, I need you to know something. All these things I have done, I cannot and will not reproduce. And that should not be our Christian lives. It's okay to look back and say, look what I've done. I'm thankful for what I've done. We will talk about that. We're going to get into Ecclesiastes some, which strangely was a book that really helped me. If you've read that book, you're like, how on earth did that book help you? But looking back on what we've done and seeing some of the futility in it is healthy. And that's largely what that book is about. But straining forward to what lies ahead, Paul talks about in Philippians 3. Piper said, you should never get to the point in your life where you're more contented with what you've already done than you are excited about what is yet to be done. So I don't care what age you are or what you've been through or what you've done. What I want you to start thinking about right now, and what I want to focus on, and I'm going to have some exercises and all kinds of ideas and thoughts over the next few weeks, is what you are going to do. Now, James, talking about if the Lord wills, right? I mean, I'm not saying that you're definitively going to predict the future. But I do think that one of the most beautiful things about humanity is that God has made us creators. We are made in his image, and the thing that differentiates us from the rest of creation is that we have an imagination, and that we create before things are created. This chair had an idea before it was created. Everything that you do, you think about before you create. And what I want to start asking today, and I'm going to ask these questions right now, is what are your purposes? What do you want to produce? I'm okay with some spiritual answers, but I am more specifically right now looking, this class is about the practicality of the Christian life. What do you want to produce? So I want to open up the floor right now. What is your purpose and what do you want to produce? Please don't be embarrassed by any answers. It can be something as simple as, I want to produce better lunches for my kids. That's okay. We're going to talk about what is a good work in future weeks, but can I hear some responses and some dialogue, which Joshua was here, but yeah, go ahead.
Daniel, I'll share just a little bit about my background and what I've done for nearly 30 years. I've been in engineering for nearly 30 years, specifically civil engineering. And early in my career, I kind of floundered a little bit. I went through a couple of different jobs, different firms, and early in that, I realized nearly all firms are identical in their makeup. But through that, God was leading me to a purpose inside of an engineering firm. I started off drawing ink on paper as a draftsman. And through that, going on to computer-aided drafting and drawing, and then eventually into designing some things for my bosses that were the engineers. Got a passion for clean water and sanitation.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird, but I just, and then through that, the Lord led me to believe, to give glory to Him in anything that I did.
Is everyone here thankful for clean water? Right? I mean, this is what I love about this, right? I mean, there's so many things that aren't silly that.
Right. And he impressed upon me, whether I'm designing ditches or the laborer that's digging the ditch, there's glory in each one of those things.
Yes.
And my job was to make this guy's job a little bit easier and to see the purpose of why he's digging that.
Yeah.
And the higher purpose in that is clean water for us.
Yes.
Or to be able to get rid of the unclean water. And so that's been my passion for the last half of my career, is to make that make the world a better place through better water.
So you just want to keep doing that more?
I do.
Okay.
But I want to be more pointed in that.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why last year I did the disaster recovery training. They have a division in that for
Yeah.
clean water.
Yeah.
And so that's eventually where I want to head.
Based on that, and maybe this is just my perception based on how I was raised and not being a Christian growing up, and do you all agree that the church collectively, not Buck Run, but the church, does not emphasize the value well of things outside of missionary and ministry work? Okay, that's a problem. I mean, Martin Luther, like one of the biggest things about the Protestant Reformation, I don't know how much you all studied that, but one of the greatest things about the Protestant Reformation was the fact that this sacred and secular divide was wrong, that there was value in all work. And that is something that I want to labor in. I want to keep asking more questions. I'm talking a lot, but I'm glad you all say that, and because that justifies my feelings. I don't think it's talked about very much, and I think it needs to be talked about more. But yes.
So I always say that I work to live, not live to work. People know that. I mean, people say that a lot, but I truly mean it. I don't have necessarily this deep passion for the job I do every day. That's concrete, like being a medical profession or whatever. But that being said, I always say that I do this for my family, and and I want to enjoy it. I want to, I have to be good at it in order to be able to do well at it, to be able to support my family and do well. So all that getting out of the way, I work in technology. So I've been in IT or some form of technology my entire career. And so one of the things, I always try to boil down what I do, because most of what I do when I tell people it's real boring. Even my wife is like, you talk and I don't really know what you're talking about. But to kind of simplify it down, I think what I like to be successful at is growing teams or like organizations in technology through technology and people. So I find that I really like people, and I like to lead them, and I like to help them connect what they do with new technology. So I've been in technology architecture. I've been in process oriented. You mentioned lean. Like I've been in Six Sigma, process improvement, things like that. But if I had to boil it down, one of the things that I like to do and that I want to be good at and I want to grow at and be influential in is growing organizations through people and technology. So again, not like providing people with clean water, which is incredibly important, and not like saving lives of people with the disease, but for me, that's what I'm able to do. And so.
And I want to just point out, I know you're making light of that, the last statement, but truly one of my issues is that every small thing that you do that is not done outside of faith is a good work. And that can be anything small. For instance, to me, the most valuable thing I'm engaged in right now is girls soccer. And I'm coaching TFCA's girls soccer team, and I'm now pouring more into the school, and I want us to have a local Christian school option that is affordable for more people. And that is on paper not the same as saving someone's life, but I will tell you 99% of what I do in an ER is not saving somebody's life. Okay, let's just be clear. So, the thing is, I know you were joking, but devaluing yourself or what you do is the problem here. It's that being a mom and producing a child that trying to produce a disciple when you have constant disobedience or problems, that is as good a work and endeavor as you could engage in your life. That working at Taco Bell or whatever it is that you do, who in here eats at Taco Bell or has before? It's like you're thankful that somebody's there working and making your taco, right? I mean, so this is all interdependent, and there's just been a problem within the Christian world. Lots of problems, but trying to value things more than other. Herschel does a very good job of saying that if you truly believe in God's grace, that you cannot condescend yourself below someone and you cannot be ascended above someone. That is true in its philosophical aspect, but we need to make it true in the practical aspect as well.
Well, and I didn't mean to. You're right. I was joking. I guess my point of view doesn't bother me. Like I don't ever feel like I'm insignificant because I know what I do and I know why I do it. So I feel very significant. Like I have no issues there. But I think also kind of building on that is the people aspect of what I do. One of the things I'm able to do and I've been able to do is set myself apart in my workplace. Like I do that repeatedly as a Christian. Like I'm constantly a topic of conversation. So I'm able to, through leadership of people, Christianity is one of the premier experiments in leadership, right? Through Christ and his example that he set. So I'm able to do that, which takes what maybe a mundane role, to the world sometimes, and makes it the utmost important.
Can you make a one-sentence statement about what you want to produce? Like, I want to produce teenage girls on the soccer field that are growing so that they grow in the world. Like, what are you wanting to produce?
Oh, wow. In life in general?
Yeah, that's the question that I want you all to take stock in right now. What is it that you want to produce?
Ultimately, at the end of my life, if I can say that I was successful in
Or just right now?
producing, just right
I can come back to you.
now. Come back to me.
Yeah. I want to know what it is, because
That's a
there's
great question.
these things are going to change over time. Like, I want to know because that's what this class is going to be about, is about productivity. What is it that you're creating for the world? because that is one of God's first command to us it was be fruitful and multiply, and that was a blessing. Fill and subdue this world. Fill and subdue the earth. Be creative. Create for the well-being of humanity. What is it that I want to know from you guys? Yeah, that book that I mentioned, What's Best Next, that's kind of the conclusion of that author in terms of what's the next best thing I can do right now. What I've learned, though, sometimes is that sometimes plate spinning is necessary. I think.
Sometimes you got to keep them spinning, but do you really got to spin 15?
That's right. Yeah, and that's a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss from a practical standpoint. I want to hear some more specifics about what it is that you're wanting to produce. I really want to hear from you guys about where you are, your lives. Yes. Well, I think you said it to some extent too. You just said your conduct. I mean, I think the desire to produce good conduct is a good endeavor, and that's good. I mean, my kids need to see good conduct from a 70-year-old. You know, what else? Who else? More ideas, thoughts. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of stuff, the answer that I was looking for right now, because that is a real practical thing in your life God's called you to do that has a real endpoint, a tangible thing to produce. You want to produce good lesson plans. That's good. And there are barriers, there are things keeping you from that, there are things that you could do better to, you know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of stuff that we're gonna discuss, that we're gonna engage in. What else? Good lesson plans, good conduct, cleaner water.
I am getting ready to retire.
Uh-huh.
After being in education for 34 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm trying to feel like, what do I want to be productive, and I want, I need to rest, but I need to be productive in that rest. So that's kind of like where I'm thinking. But like immediately, I want to help the other people on my administrative team to be able, so there's not a huge hole when I leave, because I'm leaving in a few months. So immediately I want to help them learn some of the things that I have so that they can just take it over and it can be seamless.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm also wanting to I have a new grandson, and I want to be able to help my adult children. So like, how can I also kind of move more into that role? So that's where I am.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned, I'm going to just for 1 minute talk about the rest that you mentioned. We're going to talk about the theology of rest, and interestingly, when you dive into the theology of rest, particularly how it originated in the Old Testament, entering into the Promised Land, which was the rest, which first of all they actually got to, and then in Hebrews it says, had they entered into this rest, there wouldn't still be a rest to achieve. But the Promised Land, entering into the rest, required work. Right? It wasn't just given to us. It was, hey, this rest is actually going to be conquering giants. That's the rest. And then Jesus ultimately pointed to himself as the ultimate Sabbath rest, right? Come to me, I will give you rest. That there is a rest that still exists, that God worked 6 days, rested seventh. We are made in his image. We work because God works. We rest because God rests. We rest ultimately to be productive and to work, looking forward to the future work. So one of the things that for me over the years with regards to rest is that our 21st century American mentality of rest isn't the biblical mentality of rest. That rest is actually inclusive of work. It is just a mentality that we have of resting in Christ that produces that work. It's not a rule to follow. Abby, yesterday, we had 2 soccer games, and Abby's like, I feel rested, because I was telling the other girls to rest, like to physically rest. And she's like, can I go train? Can I go run? I'm like, yeah, if you feel good, you can go run. Like, you are rested. So anyway, we'll talk about that some more. We'll dive into the scripture in coming weeks, but I think that's a paradoxical thought. Lots of things like that in scripture, right? The more empty we are, the more full we are, the more rested we are, the more productive we are. And that's kind of why I named this class Restful Productivity, because it's kind of a paradoxical thought. So you want to produce a character that is worthy of imitation?
I guess.
Okay. So not necessarily something specific, but a nature that is. So I encourage you and everyone in here to define what it is, and it can be something simple right now, but to define what it is you want to produce. And we're going to go through some exercises about identifying those things, and we're going to talk about the difference in effectiveness and efficiency. That is a huge topic. I don't want you to do the wrong things better. I want you to do the right things and to do the right things better. But for you, for instance, you want to produce a character that is worthy of imitation. Like, start to focus in on that, what that looks like, and that is where we can start to really make decisions that help us be productive to produce the very thing it is that God has called us to produce. Because otherwise we get distracted. Because it's like you can do that working at Canoe, Kentucky, or somewhere else, right? The thing you want to produce is not necessarily the work at Canoe, Kentucky. It's the character within that. Absolutely. And I want to just reemphasize at the end here that this productivity I'm talking about is that I believe that there is a stimulus and a response, that God is the ultimate stimulus, and that anything that's in us, any good, any ability, any resource is from God. And I don't want it to sound like I am saying that you go will yourself into all these things, but to recognize that these things are a grace, and that within that God is ultimately in control, but that God gave us the stimulus, and that we also biblically have a response. How God interacts with that and is sovereign over that, that's up to the pastors to explain to you guys. All right, we've got 3 minutes left. Does anybody else have an example? Please, over the next few days, we didn't get to this, but please, over the next few days, I want you guys to start thinking about your roles. Take a stock on your roles, your skills, your gifts, your talents, your abilities, your resources. How has God uniquely positioned you to be productive? And I really want you to define a few different things. If you can define several different roles. I'm a husband, a father, a doctor, soccer coach. Those are my 4 at the moment. I want you to define those things and to say, what is it within each of those things I want to produce? If you can, your homework is to try to define these things. Because really being clear with yourself about what you're wanting to produce will help you make decisions to produce those things. And it's really that simple. We just get so distracted in this knowledge-based world, 10,000 emails, text messages, all these types of things, and it keeps us from doing the things that God wants us to do.